In order to start this session, I'd like to give a bit of an overview. So as you know, the civil society and media, the differences, but also the similarities between them is always an ongoing debate. We have several opinions related to that. Are they the same? Are they different? Can they be combined or not? What are the differences between them and so on? The issues that pertain mostly are that CSOs would like media to promote their work, but on the other side, the media considers that CSOs have to provide something that is a good story in their views in order to be published and promoted. So we always have these discussions whether these two can collaborate together or are they a little bit like opponents. We also have another factor, which is the donor community that gives funding for these two sectors. So the question is the donor community bringing them together, or are they more providing even a deeper divide than it already exists? In order to start slowly the discussion, we'll touch upon many topics. We will talk about disinformation. We will talk about what CSOs can do for media and what media can do for CSOs. We'll talk about the combination of these two against, or maybe I shouldn't say against, or in their relationship with the government. So how are they behaving and so on. And then also what we like you to take out of this session most importantly is practical tips. So we will be giving you ideas and practical tips how to manage your CSOs in relation to the media. In order to start, I'd like kindly to introduce my panel. So we have online, I'm going to wait for the photographer to finish his job. Thank you so much. So we have online Adeline Houlan, who is the UNESCO representative. She's a project officer in UNESCO, and they have a project that is on building trust in media and Southeastern Europe and Turkey, which is funded by the European Commission, of course. So Adeline is going to give us an overview on this project. Then followed, we have Maria Ristic, who is the executive director of the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, known as BIRN. So if you're a CSO and don't know what BIRN is, then you have a problem, because you should be familiar with their work already. Then in a couple of moments, we will also have one more panelist, who is Tiomir Loza. He is from the Southeast European Network for Professionalization of Media. We also have here, I hope, Ivana Jelaca. Is she connected? Can you please check if she is connected at the moment?
Hello, I am. I'm here.
Okay, great. Sorry, Ivana, the screen is a bit with a limited number of
Sure.
pictures.
I'm here and ready.
Ivana Jelaca is from the Media Diversity Institute. Ivana, thank you so much for joining last minute, and I publicly apologize to you for inviting you in such short notice. Thank you so much. And we then have Mr. Ozan Akar, who is with me here in the room. He is from the Journalist Association of Turkey. And Ozan, correct me if I'm wrong. Your association has been founded in 1946. Is that it's the oldest one? Maybe we should let you first speak, but okay, we'll see over the course of the event. And of course, last but not the least, I have my dear colleague Vuk Marash, who is here from the Association of Southeastern Europe Media. So we will have an interesting discussion, and then we will see how it goes. So we'll start with Ms. Adeline, because the topic that I want to discuss is the civil society role in promoting evidence-based policies, truth, and countering disinformation. So Adeline, you have this large project that you're working with youth, and you're teaching them media literacy and how to counter disinformation. It would be great if you could share a few views with us on that regard. Thank you.
Sure, and good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me today. It's really a pleasure. I have actually prepared a short presentation. I don't know if I will manage to maybe share my screen with you so that you can see. Maybe it's a bit more interactive. I don't want to take too much of your time, but before I start sharing, just a few words. So indeed, as you mentioned, I've been coordinated this project, which is called Building Trust in Media in Southeast Europe for the past almost 3 years. And with this project, we've actually achieved quite few results. So I think it's quite a good moment for me to share them with you and discuss that. And we've worked at various levels. So let me share if it's possible. Let's see if we don't have technical problem. Please let me know if it's working. Is it?
Working perfectly fine. Please continue. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is the project. So let me go page by page. So the project had three main components. One of them is to work, as you just mentioned, on improving the main objective of the project is actually to work and to address disinformation and to build trust in media. We strongly believe that actually in order to work on disinformation, you need to work at various levels, but actually the work of media is central in addressing this issue. But also you need as well to work quite a lot on improving the critical thinking of citizens in being able to debunk disinformation. So what we've been doing is that we've been working, first of all, on media and information literacy. And we've been doing this in piloting media information literacy in 2 countries of the region, in Albania and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the idea was here really to try to work on formal education. So right now, after these years, we've worked on, and here you see in each of the slides, and I'm happy to circulate them afterwards, is also the idea to give as well some tips for you and also like some lessons learned of the work we've been doing. And so you see, like we've seen that in order to pilot media information literacy in formal education, it's really critical to work with the authorities and with the local stakeholders. So for instance, in Albania right now, we've worked with the different ministries to localize the MIL curricula, and also then to work with the different teacher trainings center in order to train teachers within school, and then pilot the media and information literacy programs within schools. We have, but we have not only worked on media and information literacy in formal education, we've also worked on media and information literacy in informal education. So here, trying to work with youth organization in order to have them endorse in their program the importance of, first of all, to make them understand the importance of working on media and information literacy, but then have them as well have within their strategies the work of MIL included. So we've worked with more than 40 youth organizations throughout the region, and they have different sets of trainings and online activities, of course, in the frame of the COVID in the past 2 years. Many of the activities have been online. We have then worked on providing various materials that I'm happy to share with you. We've actually, right now, we are finalizing a massive online course on media and information literacy. And we have so far almost 200 university students enrolled. Our objective is to have this as well, including within the accredited curricula within universities. And we have as well developed online campaigns, joint online campaigns. Also at UNESCO, we have a special program that is called MilClicks, that is about promotion of MilClicks micro-learning content online in order to spread the knowledge about media information literacy. I'm going fast, but I know we are many speakers. Then what we have been doing was to work with media on improving their skills to actually address, as I just mentioned, the importance of media to work on strengthening their skills in order for them to best address disinformation. So here, what has been very interesting is for us to increase the relationship, because there has been a boom of fact-checking of the fact-checking community in the region. What we've been doing is also working on actually improving and strengthening the relationship between the independent fact-checking community and the media outlets, and also trying to work on strengthening the skills of media on fact-checking and data journalism. So we've been organizing a lot of trainings with the fact-checkers and with the media together within newsroom. And so far, more than 200 journalists have been trained. We have also then one other very important component of the project is to improve the commitment to professional standards, but also to try to find a way of how to actually make sure that professional content, so media professional content committed to some principle, is also has visibility online, because that's one thing to actually support commitment to professional standard and to support good journalism, but we want to make sure that users are actually accessing this type of information and reading it. And that we know right now we are in an environment that is mostly digital, where journalism is mostly distributed online. So one key area of the work when you work on this information is also how social media platforms are distributing and how internet platforms are actually distributing this type of journalism. And here we have cooperated with the Ethical Journalism Network and the Journalism Trust initiatives, which are promoting self-assessment, like transparency self-assessment. And in the long run, the objective is that these media outlets would be rewarded, and there would be an agreement with the platforms that actually media outlets committed to such centers would be prioritized also like in their algorithm, because they are already prioritizing some type of content. It's just that there is no transparency about what are the types of journalistic content that are actually being prioritized. So that's just one example. And we are really believing that there is a commitment to ethics and transparency is a way towards sustainable business model for media and making quality content stand out online. Another work we've been doing is to work on supporting journalist labor rights. Here we've been working with the European Federation of Journalists. And one of the key lesson here is that it's very crucial to enhance the capacities of trade unions and journalist associations to deepen the protection of the most vulnerable journalists, and in particular here, the freelancers. So this has been something and that we continue supporting by exchange of experience with the different journalist organizations in Europe, between the region and in Europe. We've also established a youth newsroom and working on supporting to young journalists to report on issues related to freedom of expression in the region. And we have as well contributed to the publication of to the translation of various publications in relation to how to address disinformation and media information literacy. And last, what I wanted to just quickly speak about is our work to support press and media councils and self-regulatory mechanism. So through the project, we've been able to support 6 press councils in the region to increase their functioning and the fact that the accountability of media. In the past 3 years, more than 3,000 press complaints have been handled. And also, most of the press councils have adapting their press codes to the digital age. And they have actually increased their role in defending ethical journalism on social media. Now they also work increasingly together. They really have monthly meetings and try to develop joint solutions. What is for us a lessons learned is also the fact that there is definitely a potential for media councils to work together and also to maybe find a way to work with social media platforms. We've been realizing that a lot of journalistic content is being unlegitimately removed from social media platforms, and media do not have redress mechanism actually. So this is an area as well when actually it's not just about addressing disinformation, but it's also sometimes finding ways to actually address the issue of journalistic content being removed for the sake of addressing disinformation, and how to develop some redress mechanism. And here we actually believe that press and media councils could play a critical role. So I'm just going to stop here because I realize that I'm giving a lot of information and maybe that's already too long, but I stand ready for answering any question you may have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adeline, for your comprehensive presentation. Yes, you did give a lot of information, but also set the scene for the other questions that we might have for other panelists. So I just wanted to say to the audience, you can ask any questions anytime you like, and I hope that you find the sessions interesting. So Adeline, you mentioned that you mentioned a bit about the social media, so we can perhaps continue to the next issue that we would like to address is on how the CSOs can use social media and media in general to connect better and to build the constituencies. So in this regard, we would probably need some tips on how to do that. And I understand that Maria Ristic maybe has something to say in this regard. It seems that you've exercised this before, so maybe you want to share something with us in this regard. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. And I'm really sorry I'm not there with you. I would love to have a coffee after this with Vuk or sit next to him at the panel so he's not alone, but nevertheless. So I don't know if, because we're a small group, is it easier for you there, to have presentation or not? Because I have one, but I don't know.
However you like. Maybe it's, what does the group think? You want a presentation which is ready? The group is neutral, so if you feel more comfortable
let's do it without the presentation. Okay. I think we will connect better, but still. So I really want to say at the beginning, and you mentioned that at the opening of our panel, the role CSO media have, but I really want to say, and I'm speaking in the name of the whole BIR, is that for us as organization, civil society was always a partner. And this is the relationship that we nurture continuously and that we are very proud of. So we absolutely never saw civil society as a competition, and none of our work would actually be so impactful and make sense without the work of civil society, for two reasons. First, because we work with civil society in terms of that we as publishers publish their work. So a lot of the stories that we are working on are actually based on the civil society research and the work the civil society has been doing, from LGBT rights to transitional justice to media freedom, etc. So we work regionally, locally, and internationally with various CSO and base. Actually, I think 80% of the people we quote in our articles are actually members of civil society. And then there's also other element, which in some countries is bigger and then in some smaller, is that we look into the civil society to actually follow up on the stories that we publish in terms of that they demand a change and do advocacy on the basis of the findings of BM stories. And we had many good examples in that area, from Montenegro to Serbia to many other countries. So I know we have limited time. I just wanted to give you a few tips how you can do this, or how we collaborate with the media. And I always say that the two most important things are two P's. One is planning, the other is partnership. So why is planning important? First, because you need to develop the communication strategy, not because this is a document, but simply because it will outline your expectations and allow you better time management, which we all know in the project is something that can be very difficult. Then also, if you're planning ahead, you can look into different media opportunities that are not necessarily just your projects. And when I'm saying media opportunities is, for example, creating alternative calendars that will link your project activities with other dates and events that are not necessarily your project events. And I'm referring here, for example, on, I don't know, Day on Media Freedom, of Day of Earth, etc. So depending on the topic you have, there are many calendars days in the year where you can link your activities with some important calendar date. And I know that, as I said, in projects we write about media and journalists as stakeholders and beneficiaries, but I really think that we should look each other as partners. And in that sense, that we should not create, in a way, catch-all approaches, but actually find tailor-made relationships that we want to nurture with certain partners and with certain media outlets. So how is that done? is that you can find an ally among individual journalists, meaning that you can find a journalist that usually covers the topic or is interested in the topic your project is about, and make connection with that journalist outside of the project, be it coffees or something else. It's up to you, but it's important to create a relationship. Other thing is obviously to do a research. What do you want to achieve and what is the best media outlet to get to your audience? We all want mainstream media because they have the biggest reach, but they are the most difficult to get. So my suggestion is to go to local media or credible media, depending on the needs of your project. And one very important element, and I think I'm speaking in the name of my journalism colleagues, is that to try to be honest and be respectful. So be actually honest what you expect from that relationship and what journalists can do for you, and then the journalist will usually or hopefully should be honest as well in that relationship. So few key tips how we work with CSOs is that we ask them usually to provide us the reports that they are preparing or launching a bit in advance under embargo, so that we as an organization have time to prepare a story, article, interview, whatever we decide, but it's important to have this, I would say, time frame to prepare for the publishing, because when we receive the report on the day when the report was published, it's usually that all agencies already took the report, and that simply because of other things, it's very difficult for us to follow up. And I'm not speaking here only about BIN. I know many media outlets think the same, so they appreciate things in advance. And in these press releases that we often receive, I think the key thing is to point out the new information or the key information at the beginning of the press release, so that the one person who sees that email, and that is usually the editor, can see what is new there. And also you can also offer beyond press releases interviews and other aspects of your work that is not necessarily a press release of the report or the work that you did. One more thing that I think now it has its own life outside of media is to create infographics and extract raw data from your work that can be used for journalistic articles. And I know many civil society groups had different work published as infographic of different stats, etc. And then at the end, media outlets makes news out of it from the social media posts that organizations made. So I know this is not something fantastic, and that we often want things to go in depth and to have better understanding, but we also have to understand a reality, and that is that the news cycle, unfortunately, is now really fast. So either you get the story as data story, or you wait for another opportunity to get a great bigger story. Also, one more thing that we very much nurture with civil society is publishing their opinions or comments on the current affairs. So this is a way to promote the project result, but linked with the current events that are happening in the country. For example, I now have a thought of the Open Balkan Initiative. Everyone talks about that. What is it, etc., whether it's different than CEFTA or not. So for example, I'm sure that there are organizations who work on issues around trade. So for example, it would be very interesting to look into the opinion piece from someone from civil society who can explain why is Open Balkan needed, or whether it will resolve the issues that CEFTA try to resolve or not. So this is just one example, but along these lines. So whenever there is a news, I'm sure you're working on something that is connected to that. So you can in advance be proactive and offer this to the media outlets. At the end of the day, I think it's really important to become a trusted source for certain topics, and most of the civil society organizations are that. It is just that you need to find, in a way, your partner in the media outlets. As I said, it's a relationship that as every relationship, it needs a lot of time and it needs an effort to work out. But I think in this region, especially now with the different authoritarian tendencies and different, I would say, attacks and pressures on civil society, it is absolutely necessary that we work together as partners. Alliances, one side against the other, I really think that the past tense. In a way, it's also, we have to be fair, it's also not always a relationship that brings fruits, but I think on a long run, we are, in a way, should turn to each other. I'm also often very critical of both the media scene and the civil society in the Balkans, but I think in this area, we should really look into the possibilities and not only the challenges. So I will end here, and if there are more questions, I am really looking forward to answering them. Thank you.
Maria, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. You mentioned the challenges. If we have time, we might get back to you to just list one or two, but not all of them, because I assume there are many. So thank you so much. I'll turn a bit to my colleagues here that are the panelists in the room. We spoke yesterday a bit in person, and with Vuk, we talked about how there is apparently a mixture of the functions of what is a CSO and what is a media CSO and outlet. So maybe Vuk, you can provide us an overview of what your opinion is. Are these two divided, or do you see these two as intersecting with each other? Did you, as you said yesterday, I think we lost that line, so maybe you can elaborate that a little bit for us.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, hello to everyone. Hello to the panelists we see online. And I agree with Maria, it would be really great to have a coffee in this wonderful facility after the panel. But unfortunately, it is what it is. But hopefully we will be interesting to the audience. And I'll actually start with what Maria mentioned, partnership. I believe this is the most important thing if we are looking on a greater picture and what do we want to achieve. But on the other hand, unfortunately, in theory, that partnership is something natural, but in practice, it doesn't look that much often. And why do I say so? When we talk about differences between CSOs and media, we forgot one very important stakeholder, which I would say non-profit media, because they are different in terms that CSOs don't look at them like NGOs, rather they see them as media, while the mainstream media don't see them as media rather than NGOs. So they are somewhere in between. Have to local and very, very rarely switching the microphones. Okay. I feel like a singer now. Very rarely they were actually getting any media space at that time. On the other hand, mainstream media did have a lot of people. They were able to earn a lot of money on the market. Circulations, even in the Montenegro, which is smallest, were dozens of thousands of copies per day. So you could earn money, you could employ a lot of journalists who were able to be proficient in a very particular topic. Like you had the luxury to cover healthcare, education, defense, many other sectors by a person who were really experts in the fields. On the other hand, CSOs were fighting to get any kind of a media space and attraction and to try to influence the decision-making process, but without access to media, that was almost impossible. However, if we look just to 10 years ago, situation completely changed. CSOs already became extremely important players in the entire Western Balkan, at least, while on the other hand, media, mainstream media, while preserving the influence, they started losing circulation, they started losing advertising money and everything, and simply their editorials become smaller. So what do we have now? Today, mainstream media are among all media, the channels that has the most reach, but however, they are chasing the news. And it's all about who will be the first, which means the quality is down. The number of information produced is in a hyper-production, and you literally get service information. It's very hard to organize within any mainstream media outlet any kind of investigative work which lasts for days, because simply you have to fill the space and you have to provide a lot of information to the audience. On the other hand, the non-profit media are ones who are producing and who has so to say, the luxury to produce serious investigative content, who are able to employ resources in investigating a particular topic area or whatever, and to provide really very concrete benefits to the mainstream media, who can pick up and then continue to republish that information. And on the other hand, you have CSOs who are unfortunately becoming, at least most prominent CSOs in each country, who are mostly becoming the donor organizations, because now the donors simply don't want to manage grants anymore, and they are insisting on providing bigger grants to a number of organizations who will then disburse funds through the sub-granting and everything. And I believe we are all in this whole familiar with the process. So we are preventing those CSOs from working their regular job and ordinary job where they have the expertise, and transforming them piece by piece into something different. So in that sense, it's very hard to get any impact if we don't have that cooperation. And when I say cooperation, I mean that if we don't have the inputs from the civil society, the data provided, the knowledge, the expertise, if we don't have the skills and the knowledge from the non-profit media who are able to analyze, process, investigate cases, get to the people, dig out the data, the documents, and in the end, the mainstream media who will actually be able to communicate that content to the widest audiences, then we have a problem, because nobody is achieving what I believe is our mutual goal, and this is to get a reform in the society. Of course, at the same time, we do have to be very cautious about the quality of the news, about professionalization, and many times even we spoke on internally about how important it is to basically, for many media, to get back to the basic principles of the journalism, like to get the other side to contact them and to ask them for opinion, because unfortunately, in many mainstream media, you have even lost that. So we are talking about very biased content, and sometimes even very unprofessional. But in order to understand this problem, and I will end up soon, we have to know just some figures. All the research showed that between 70 and 80% of people only read headlines and look at the photos. So basically, vast majority of the entire population is informed in that tabloid content way. You get a headline, you get a photo, you share it on social media, that's it. Up to 30% goes deeper and actually wants to find more. In that sense, we need new forms. And this is what also Maria was mentioning, something I believe media and even CSOs do not know still how to make. Because we see kids who are producing TikTok content, And on the other hand, you don't see any mainstream media there because they simply don't know how to pack the news in that format that will be attractive to the younger audiences. And for example, coming to social media trends, in 2012, I dig up last night these data. On average, people were spending 90 minutes per day on social media. 90, so hour and a half in 2012. Today, it's 150 minutes. So the number is rising, but when we come to, for example, Generation Z, so we are talking about people from 5 to 24, they spend 8+ hours online every day, out of which almost 3 hours on social media. So these are people who are not actually consuming traditional or mainstream media content. They get informed on social media, and we have to find a way to reach to them. So this is why that cooperation between CSOs, non-profit media, and mainstream media is even more important now in the era of disinformation. Because if we don't educate them and inform, then we are leaving murky and unidentified content providers to do so through the social media with the content that is not undergone any editorial supervision, that we don't know what are the sources of information, and we don't know even if the information provided are accurate. So new news forms definitely have to be developed in that partnership to make it attractive to younger audiences and to actually attract these people. We have to understand, and that would be my second tip, unfortunately, as we see that the speed is extremely important now and the quality not that much, that for mainstream media, if you produce the content that is easy to grab, more likely it will end up on their pages because they don't need a lot of time to go through the content and to manage it. It's easier to put it there. And finally, the last thing is the utilization of the comparative advantages that we have, which is necessary. In-depth knowledge of CSOs, and I will repeat this all the time, investigative and other resources and skills of non-profit media, and the reach and audiences of the mainstream media. And I still believe that in that way we can actually win the fight against the disinformation. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vuk. At this point, maybe, does anybody from the room want to ask anything, or do you have any questions? Not at the moment, maybe. Okay, I think we can switch to the participant that joined us a bit later, which is Mr. Tihomir Loza. He is the representative from the Southeastern European Network for Professionalization of Media. And it's a network of 19 media centers and across 13 countries of the Central and Southeastern Europe. That's a lot of centers, Mr. Loza, so I believe you have a really well formulated opinion from the diversity of the centers that you get, but also in light what Mr. Marash said, that perhaps you can reflect a bit on that. What's your opinion on whether are the media outlets actually using CSOs to generate content? Do they go through that path, or they have other sources to generate their content? If you could provide an overview, and it would also help us from the region that you cover, perhaps maybe to identify the regions where this cooperation is going well, and maybe another one where there are challenges in this regard, basically the cooperation between CSOs and media. That would help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also wish I could join you there in Skopje. Unfortunately, I couldn't. This week is extremely busy. Good to see you all. Good to hear such insightful discussions. Yes, we are a group of civil society organizations focused on media issues, on freedom of expression issues, and we operate in these countries in Central and Southeast Europe. So it's countries from like Hungary or Slovenia in Northwest, all the way down to Turkey in Southeast. Currently, we run a project, rather large regional project in the Western Balkans and Turkey called Resilience Project, concerned primarily with disinformation, hate speech, and media trust. The biggest chunk, or possibly the biggest chunk of that project, is a research package which looked at all of these issues in different fashions, including quite large empirical research on media trust and gender issues. And I would say that we are probably not the best example of problems in cooperating with the media, because very often we find that the issues that we look at, the issues that we focus on, are of interest of the colleagues even in mainstream media. So we often have few problems really sort of, realizing this cooperation with the media. We, for example, had also on some previous projects, but on this one as well, campaigns whereby we would produce usually video materials or some shorter forms like animation, etc. That media outlets would then help us disseminate. Some of you may remember 3 years ago we had a quite sort of elaborate campaign on freedom of expression issues and on journalism with those short videos with some of the leading journalists in the region actually appearing in those videos and etc. And some of the most influential independent, if that's the right word, TV stations airing that content, etc. On this particular project, on the current project, we also have a sub-granting scheme, which is this time focused on small towns and rural communities. So we are trying to go beyond big urban centers. And the idea there is also partly to encourage these local NGOs, these grassroots, to cooperate with local media, which I think is always an important part of the picture. The thing is, we all know that there is quite a lot of skepticism or suspicion in the mainstream society of civil society organizations. It's not the same in each of these countries, but in some of them, they are being prescribed as like foreign agents even, etc. We've seen that in some countries, civil society organizations were, to say the least, harassed, let's say, by tax authorities, etc. In the same time, the much of the mainstream media is part of this sort of captured state phenomenon that we see in many countries of the region. And in reality, very often the best journalism is produced by outlets that are run by civil society organizations, the so-called non-profit journalism, or the journalism, alternative journalism. I think Björn would fit that description pretty well. There are these fantastic investigative centers in many of these countries. Some of our members are actually in that sort of position in Turkey, BNet and P24. etc. So we are not, of course, in an ideal world, there would be, proper independent media sector, proper independent CSO sector, would be modes of cooperation, etc. But we are not in that position in the Western Balkans and Turkey, I'm afraid. So I think CSOs shouldn't have many illusions about the possibilities of sort of very close cooperation at this point with some of the biggest media outlets that are actually parts of the ruling regimes in these countries. At the same time, in all of these countries, there are outlets that are not sort of outright members of the ruling interest groups, etc. And cooperation with them is, of course, possible, and it often actually happens in a pretty good manner. I think my colleagues who spoke earlier, Maria in particular, gave some excellent tips to the civil society organizations when it comes to approaching the media, when it comes to approaching editorial teams. These things that calendars that Maria mentioned are extremely important, of course. I would say that generally CSOs, when they are pitching to the media, they should not be approaching editors with stories on their projects. The media are not, especially the mainstream media, they're not there to promote CSOs projects. They're not there to do a story on particular conference, etc. What the CSOs should be doing is selling their expertise, selling stories on issues, selling their insights. If that somehow coincides with the project that they are doing, so be it. Great, excellent. But what the media is or should be interested in the first place are stories on important societal issues, and CSOs should be fashioning themselves in that manner, offering themselves as experts, as people who have important insights in some of those issues, etc. And they should be, quite sort of confident. Many of them are obviously certainly among the leading experts on some of those issues mentioned earlier in their countries. I'm quite skeptical about putting too much effort into producing something that we think new generations would swallow easily, etc., packing everything for TikTok, etc. And then that CSOs will be successful only on the account of being modern, as it were. I don't think that's of course, it doesn't hurt to be packed in these new forms. That always helps if it is done earlier. But the content, the meaning of that content, the expertise, the insights that CSOs can offer are actually much more important, and they could be actually sold, as it were, to the mainstream media, to any media really, in any sort of form, including some traditional forms. For example, many of these issues and I'm sure quite a few media outlets would be willing to run well-written, well-argued traditional op-ed articles on some of those issues. I don't see that many civil society organizations are doing that sort of thing. Maybe a bit of training in that department is required. So, you know, simple stuff, traditional stuff, but when an NGO has something important to say, it's not just a matter of packing it into modern forms. It is actually a matter of articulating it in a number of forms, including those traditional forms, and then presenting it as important knowledge rather than parts of their current projects, etc. So I think that much for me at this point. It is an important issue that we are addressing here today. You know, and I don't think there are many easy answers. But I think we shouldn't also be sending a message to the wider CSOs world that there is something terribly wrong that the CSOs are doing. I mean, in many respects, CSOs are the best parts of these societies. They are doing great. So I understand this session today as a sort of small effort, small step in order to help them publicize their expertise better.
Thank you so much, Mr. Loza. That's indeed the aim of this session. We also discussed it with representatives of DG NIR, which I thank for participating here today with Victor, that we would like from this session to have people and CSOs that walk away with at least a little bit of tips or a toolkit on how to proceed further for promoting their work. So you actually mentioned the most important part of this session. We will continue with the rest of the panelists that we have. So basically, it was mentioned several times that there are different ways on how CSOs can be presented in the social media and how the social media can be used for this purpose. So today with us is Ivana Jelac from the Media Diversity Institute. Ivana, I checked your website and you have so many publications, but also guidelines on how to do things for CSO. So if you haven't done so, just go to the Media Diversity Institute website and just select the category CSOs and you will get all these publications. Could you please give us a few tips on the general access to social media and the behavior that the CSOs should have under consideration, especially for the fact that there are different understandings, as we said. There's also content that is being blocked in social media. So what's that formula to go out, use the social media, but also be factorize yourself as a CSO in order to promote your work? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And yeah, let me just start by saying that I'm also sorry for not being there with you. The best part usually is the coffee afterwards when we continue our discussions from the panel, but nevertheless. Yeah, indeed, MDI has been working for over 2 decades now on issues related to media development, inclusive journalism, representation of social diversity in the media, and our approach in general is to try to put civil society and media work together. And for a while now, when I say media, it's when we say media, it's not mainstream media only, but in the broader sense, it's also social media. So when we work with civil society organizations to build their capacity to work with media, we do try to give them tips, as Maria was mentioning, how to approach mainstream media, but it's also how to utilize social media. And there are quite different tips there, starting from the fact that we can see it increasingly recently that it's very often social media that set actually the topics and initiate discussions which mainstream media want. And quite recently, last year in Serbia, we had this a movement basically which started from a hashtag I didn't report it, nisam prijavila, which was actually initiating a very important topic that mainstream media haven't really touched upon, and it was why women do not report gender-based violence. And then it starting from the social media ended up in the mainstream media. So it's very important for the civil society also to recognize the importance and all the ways they can use social media to actually reach mainstream media, but also reach decision makers and of course citizens, which is basically the most important part. I would go back to what Tihomir mentioned earlier. Indeed, there is a huge challenge of the fact that how civil society is basically perceived by citizens, and there's always in many countries in the region still this strong narrative about foreign peace, etc., which then kind of makes this cooperation between citizens and civil society a bit difficult, and basically that does not allow citizens to recognize civil society as their channel to reach media, decision makers, etc. But indeed, through our work, for example, in Serbia, we're running this project which is called Mladi, and which is about young people using media and digital literacy tools to become active civic participants. We try to foster them actually recognize how they can utilize both mainstream and social media to reach and bring about the change in their societies. I would also like to add here that we don't necessarily have to always find ways to create content for the social media. There's already plenty of stuff which is already there. So for example, influencers. And when I say that, I don't mean those 2 million people or a couple of million people, influencers who have a couple of million of followers, because their values are often very problematic, but they're those of a smaller scale influencers who do already have values set, and there's a huge actually space to work with them basically on improving and raising people's awareness on certain issues. Whenever we work with either civil society or media, we provide them kind of a mentoring support in order to put in practice what they have learned through our trainings. And this actually, whether it's media or civil society, actually helps them overcome all the obstacles they come across. So for example, when we work with the media, we try to kind of and that goes back what Maria was mentioning, to actually find the media, find the civil society organizations that can be a source of stories, of expertise. And that's one of the most important things of helping media recognize civil society as a source of stories and the kind of expertise for certain topics. And we like to call them that business case for diversity. So when we work on representation of diversity in the media, we like to help journalists recognize how they can actually have profit from addressing different kinds of audiences in their reporting. And I would actually, and we always, when working with media, have this challenge of how effective this work actually is. Working with mainstream media is always quite difficult, especially in certain countries in the region. And even if you have a journalist, let's say, on your training, is always an issue how effective that will be, because these journalists will go back to their newsrooms, to their editors, and they'll have to pitch a story and make sure it's published at the end of the day. So there are quite a few ways to kind of mitigate this obstacle. And I would say that despite of the difficulties, there are topics which are of interest of all the media. And basically we have seen it, there is this group female journalists against gender-based violence. It's very difficult to talk to media and make sure that topics, for example, related to hate speech, which is a topic of our Reporting Diversity Network project. It's very difficult to get these topics in the mainstream media, but when there are topics or angles of certain topics which are of interest, even of those media we like to consider less approachable. So, for example, these groups are members of these groups are journalists from all sorts of media, including those we like to consider tabloids. So there are topics which are of interest to all these media, and are willing to work on these issues. I would also say, and this was already mentioned, I would say by Tiho, that for us, it seems that working with local media seems quite effective. And according to some researchers, basically citizens recognize them and have even more trust in them, because I believe they address their local needs and issues more than mainstream media. So and when it comes to local media, they tend to be more cooperative and recognize the potential that civil society actually can bring to them. Also, youth media, for example, our research has shown that youth media, apart from being more likely to approach younger audiences, are also more professional. They don't breach ethical codex, and they are even more willing and more prone to opening controversial social topics. So basically, many topics which are avoided by the mainstream media are often opened by the youth media. So there is a big potential of actually working with these sorts of media, especially when let's say problematic topics are in question. And finally, we do, going back to the social media, I haven't mentioned it. Yes, when we try to provide different kind of tools, mentoring support, but also guidelines. So one of our guidelines produced through this Mladi project in Serbia is online campaigns from A to Z, basically written by two young people, and it brings examples of both local and international campaigns who started on social media but actually brought about change or either social media policy level. And finally, and I'll end here, although book was right when mentioning the burden to civil society in doing different things, but actually this sub-granting that civil society provides can also be a powerful tool, because through sub-granting that we do, we also encourage this cooperation between civil society and the media, or usually on a smaller scale, local level. So smaller organization working with certain issues, for example, people with disabilities and their perception in the media or similar issues, and then smaller scale local media. And this then works, in practice works quite well, but still reaches citizens in their local communities and raises their awareness about certain topics. I will end here for now, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you so much, Ivana, and also thank you for your time. Also, maybe in chat you can paste the link to your publication, because it's a great document with a lot of infographics and with a lot of tools that you might find useful for yourself later. Last but not least, I will turn to our panelists here. And I saw there are some comments in chat that when my panelists in the room here speak, you don't hear them very well. So we're going to conduct a little test, in which case I have a question for our dear representative here from Turkey, who is Ozan Açar. And we are going to switch to a very interesting topic, which is basically CSOs and media. Can they come together in relationship with the government? And I understand that in Turkey, as you said yesterday, it's a very big country. There's a lot of culture, there's a lot of diversity. So there are probably a lot of opinions in this regard. And we would very much appreciate if you could give us an overview over this relation between these two instances, let's say. So we're going to test if we can hear Ozan, and then just signal me from Zoom if you can hear him well, so that we can have a quality discussion, okay?
So we're going to test if you can hear me first, if I'm correct.
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, okay. Well, yes, as I mentioned yesterday, Turkey is quite a diverse, big country, and there are a lot of factors to take into consideration when we're talking about Turkey that probably distinguish itself from the Balkan region in several regards. In terms of the question that you asked, Afrodita, regarding establishing constituencies and how the media might facilitate that, and what we do, that's a difficult question to answer, I think, because, well, I'd first want to talk about briefly what we do and how we may facilitate that. As I said, I'm from the Association of Journalists. Well, I'm the project officer of one of the projects that it implements. It's one of the oldest civil society organizations in Turkey, and it's the oldest civil society organization that focuses on the media sector. Like I said, we were established in 1946. So one of the key areas that we focus on is ensuring media pluralism in Turkey, because we have our own sub-granting scheme. And I believe we have kind of an edge there because our executive board is comprised of very experienced journalists that know the media context in Turkey. They know what it means to be journalists in Turkey, and they know what it means to be administrative journalists, like running a newspaper in Turkey as well. So I think that gives us an edge when it comes to, distributing our sub-granting schemes, because the media sector is very specific. It has its own very specific needs, requisites that we need to really address before, providing support to these so-called alternative media organizations. Therefore, in our discussion yesterday, I mentioned that there is a significant intersection between civil society organizations and these quote-unquote alternative media organizations. There are very different kind of takes on it. Some people call them nonprofits. Some people call them independent media organizations or alternative media organizations. I'll just refer to them as alternative media organizations in Turkey because of the media ownership structure. And the media ownership structure in Turkey, just to briefly mention, is kind of stuck between a vice of pro-government media and opposition media. And this is significantly related in how on the revenue sources of these media outlets. I'm not sure how well you're acquainted with the revenue sources of media outlets in Turkey, but we have a press advertising agency, which basically uses public funds to provide revenue for newspapers, media outlets, and so on. And this is basically used at the discretion of the political will. So that in itself kind of provides certain funds to be channeled to certain politically affiliated organizations, while some remain on the outside. Like I said, this has caused kind of a pro-government opposition binary, and a lot of the media that's produced is produced within this context. So that results in kind of very limited hegemonic discourses to kind of emerge. And that has kind of underlined the importance of the flourishing alternative media sector in Turkey, because they do provide narratives that are often obscured or overlooked, whether on purpose or whether due to logistical reasons, and they do provide a very important voice to a lot of, I think, civil society organizations and a lot of underrepresented groups in Turkey as well. That being said, I think the conceptual difference between a civil society organization and an alternative media outlet in Turkey is very, very little these days, because I'm basing this on some of the sub-grant beneficiaries that we've provided support with. And in Turkey, you often see now newspapers that or alternative news outlets that produce news in very specific contexts. For example, you have newspapers called gazete, for example. It's a pun on gazete, newspaper, and kadın, which means woman. So it's a feminist-oriented news outlet that produces news specifically that is gender sensitive and so on. And you've got, for example, Yeşil Gazete, green newspaper, for example, which perhaps is a little ironic if you actually printed a newspaper, but but they carry their activities online. So they're eco-friendly and whatever. So they have a very specific kind of area and an agenda that they focus on when they produce news. So I think there is kind of an overlap there in terms of how civil society organizations have a set mission that they want to accomplish, whether that be raising awareness or increasing capacity or facilitating social inclusion. These alternative media outlets assume the same kind of role. And we have provided a lot of support to these types of outlets to ensure that these discourses emerge and that, you know, the media environment does not only consist of this pro-government opposition binary. So that being said, I think alternative media outlets in Turkey, specifically in Turkey, have a very big role in ensuring that constituencies can be formed, can be provided, and this can effectively have influence on legislation, provided that Parliament, of course, is reinstated with increased discretion in terms of producing law and, you know, effectively kind of not administrating, but exercising, how do I say it, at least a degree of influence over the administration. So we've also kind of really focused on disinformation in the past few years. And we believe that rather than, you know, just codifying what the disinformation contains in law would not necessarily be enough. We were discussing, the previous panelists, of how social media literacy plays media literacy in general plays an important role in countering disinformation. I don't necessarily agree with that because this is a topic that we've discussed extensively with some of our stakeholders, both in Turkey and abroad. But the way disinformation is carried out is, in Turkey, is quite intricate and complex. So we need to kind of define disinformation first. And in our media monitoring reports, we define disinformation of the subversion of phenomena for political gain. So it's quite different than misinformation. It's not outright lying, but it's portraying phenomena in a certain way to kind of propagate your own narrative and to facilitate your own political gain. In Turkey, that mainly manifests in, well, in the past 5-6 years, it is mainly focused on so national security issues, portraying everything to be a national security issue, and therefore using anti-terror laws to circumvent freedom of expression, restricted and prevented and actively shut down outlets most of the time. So in this regard, we believe that, especially with the refugee crisis that we're experiencing, and it's been documented so much in the past few months, rather than just codifying this in law or actually to expect, I don't know, civil society organizations to limitedly condemn what the government is doing or what these media outlets are doing, it's important to produce healthy and more comprehensive narratives to ensure that refugees aren't portrayed in only a certain way in the media. And this is quite important in terms of establishing more social inclusion, and also to mitigate any possible violence that we might see in the future, because it appears to be quite a very, very difficult issue that we're going to have to discuss in the upcoming days, especially in the election period and election day as well. So that's all I really have to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Ozan, thank you so much. Always interesting to hear a perspective from Turkey because of the characteristics of the region and the differences there. So we've concluded with the panelists, and I would like to turn to the audience. If anybody has any questions at this point or any comments that you feel that you would like to say, maybe in relation to the situation in your countries. I'm not sure, is everybody here from the same country, or are we mixed? I'm not so sure. So maybe, sorry? A little bit mixed, okay. Maybe you would like to provide an overview. Okay, you can go ahead, please. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Eva. I'm coming from Alda. I'm from our office in Skopje. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I was charged with the communication in our office by the lack of chances that our communication officer quit. So I had to learn communication and learn how to contact media by myself. And I think that the biggest problem that I had while contacting media and while trying to establish our social media in the big social media, our social media accounts in the big social media pool, was actually the language. That was the biggest problem that I had. And we are, as CSOs, so enveloped in our project-based language when we write news that sometimes they seem dull. I completely agree with the panelists when they say that talking about conferences and events is really boring, because when you see the 5 W's, you know, what, where, when, you know, you need to put in the first paragraph, and they are usually the same sentences, same boring facts. Maybe there were some changes in the panelists. Maybe there was some interesting information that were shared, but usually that's not mentioned in the first paragraph in our articles. So I had a really nice opportunity to follow the Taxos training on storytelling, which I completely recommend, because it completely changed my vision on how to actually provide the necessary information to media. And also it's really important to follow your own successes in the past and analyze what you've done on communication wise in your organization. I have a small habit of doing investigation in January, usually on our social media, to see when we had the most followers, when we had the most likes on our web page, or what documents are most read in our website. And I can see that usually campaigns that have persons in them are the most popular. So for me, COVID was really difficult in that point of view, because pictures of Zoom are not really interesting when you put them on, even though we had like a beautiful, in March, we had a Zoom conference with 100 persons on tourism from the Balkans, from everywhere. But the end, the topics was wonderful. But the most interesting part, when we talked on the radio on that topic. So it was perceived in a different way than just put a Zoom picture on the website. So I really applaud all of the Balkan initiatives on the when we talk about media and CSOs, because we had difficulties in the past. We have a network of partners in the region, and sometimes it's really difficult to find news outlets that will bring it in a Balkan way, in a regional way. I can target my organizations and my media in the country. We have a great ally in Macedonia with Metamorphosis. They have a media outlet called meta.mk, and they actually translate articles in all of the language of the Balkan. So you have the Albanian and Serbian, but that is a rare feat. So partnerships are really important to build, and it's a really slow process, of course.
Thank you so much for this real life scenario, I would call it, because this is what in fact happens. And maybe some of the panelists, I see Adeline has her hand up, but Adeline, we have one more person here that would like to speak from the audience, and maybe then you can combine the input. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. I'm also coming from Macedonia, but I fully agree at some point with Eva, but also I really appreciate the suggestions and tips that were promoted by Maria and even how the CSO should communicate with the media. What we should always be aware that the civil society organization, as was mentioned, are not considered as a relevant source of expertise on certain topics. But that is from the point of view that the civil society organizations are not always trying to reach the media. Even this summit now, if you open the media generator in Macedonia, you will see that most of the media about the summit for these days are Open Balkan Summit, which is happening in the same time. So actually the media are not interested in the civil society topic because we are all aware that civil society are not a selling point for media. And we also have to be aware of that. So what I also want to suggest, and I would also like to hear the Maria, if maybe Birn, because they're at some point a media outlet, but also organizations that are implementing a lot of projects with media topics and civil society organization in the Balkan region. The European Commission in the past year, they were really trying to provide support for the all supported project for the media visibility in all budget. There were budgeted line for media visibilities. But my question here is, if the media outlet is not a partner in the project, how they can actually spend those money? And I have never seen that any of the networks, even the regional project, they were considering this budget for some of the media networks in the region that can be in the future used for sharing the information, which are not selling, but at this point they're covered for their job. So I'm having a question for Maria, if they have experienced such a invitation by some of the civil society network project have been supported by you to be promoted through BIRN without BIRN being partner in the project.
Thank you so much again for these realistic questions, and that maybe our panelists can provide answers. So we'll slowly go to Adeline, who has her hand up, and then to Maria, and then we most probably close the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really interesting to listen to all of these contributions and reactions. It was more from my side, more of a comment and a reaction, because we've heard right now today a lot about the need to how to produce attractive content and to make it like attractive as well for a young generation to read. And I still want to come back to what I was just mentioning right at the beginning. I think, because I'm not sure we've discussed, and I think there is more room to discuss that more in details, but in my opinion, one of the major issues is still related to the way platforms are prioritizing content, and the fact that these clickbaits and everything that actually how media content is being distributed is very much relying on the algorithm of platform, which is based on engagement, not on credibility. So basically, and if you look at the reports that have been shared by Facebook whistleblower in 2008, it shows that in 2018, they have changed their algorithm so that the most shared content online is not the credible content. It is the content that are reshared where there are most comments. And we know that this is the way actually that is creating a way that for media, we don't know what is, and there is no transparency about what kind of content. So in our opinion, especially at UNESCO, what we are trying to push is to, one, make sure that there is much more platform transparency. And here, we strongly believe that working with the European Union is very important, because the European Union has just recently adopted and is about to release this Digital Services Act, which is very important for media. And I think we need to have more conversation as well in this region about how to bring transparency about the moderation of content and journalistic content online, and also how such content also from the CSO side are being prioritized. And also like bringing CSOs all together in order to initiate a dialogue at local level, because most of these platforms are not in the region. There is no dialogue. There is nobody. Okay, we've heard about some of the fact checkers like Metamorphosis, some of them that are actually present in the region and cooperating with the platform, but we don't know who is there and how is content moderated. So that's just one thing I wanted to say, which for us is one of the way forward as well, like working with CSOs. And just to mention that one project that we have as well with the European Commission, but here only in Bosnia, is actually to try to develop local coalition of CSOs on content moderation, in order to bridge the gap between the local communities and the platforms at global level.
Thank you so much, Adeline. And good that you're mentioning this, because also the CSOs that are here, but also the ones that will be watching later this live streaming or that will be joining later, probably can also visit the part of the UNESCO website that has these projects and so on. And why not also engage with you together in order to reach this goal, which you mentioned that is quite interesting for the topic. I will just go very briefly to Maria. I understand that we had technical issues in the beginning, but I also understand that you all panelists were here on time. And we would really love to conclude with Maria's reply to the question for the participant that we had here. Thank you.
Thank you. I can have a really long answer, but I'll try not to. We did previously had experiences with other media taking our content, as well as publishing their content without directly being linked with the project. And basically the main, I would say, approach for both of us and the CSOs was that we send this to specific people, journalists and editors, as a question or an offer of a news article, opinion article, then infographics or data from our project, that we explain to the media outlets why we think this is relevant today. So it can be, as I said, for example, I now can recall of one project where we did a lot of monitoring of hate speech. So for example, we send the data related to the hate speech to the one media outlet or two media outlets, or if it's a regional project, to 5 media outlets from different countries, and then offer them to be the only one to run this news, in a way, to give them exclusive right to do it. That is far more easier than sending it to everyone, because a lot of media editors, just when they see that the email has 6 to 7 media outlets there in the CC, they are immediately thinking like, okay, anyone will have it, why it's only me publishing this? So for example, this is the best, I think, approach, and a book explained that very well. Our media are also a lot copy-paste. So if you have one media outlet, often that's quite enough. Others will pick it up. It's more assuring that they will do it than not. Then, for example, I recently also had a situation where I helped colleagues from Human Rights Watch to publish something in our media outlets in the region, and I did the same. Like, the topic of the report was very around the different cluster munition used in Ukrainian war, and I was thinking like no one would care about cluster munition in the Balkans, because I'm not sure how many people know about this. But then I found that, for example, some of the cluster munition was used in the 1990s war. So I linked that press statement with the fact that we also had similar experience, and then I also sent it to 3-4 media outlets. I didn't send it to everyone. But on the project side, and this is where I will end, we also had, when we worked on a funded projects, we had very good experience with partnering with the CSOs on certain topics. So in the project proposal, it was clear from the beginning that the CSOs will work on the research, and then that the media outlet and the role of BIR is actually to use this data for visibility and promotion. So that was also, we had a big project like that in Albania. We had one in Macedonia a bit long time ago, but still that was a pilot, and we implemented similar approaches as well. So I think it's only the fact that you need to find media outlets that are interested in this. And I think it's also realistic, and I said it at the beginning, to acknowledge that you cannot have everyone. I sometimes joke, but at the end that's true. Imagine if all BIRN articles would have been published on public broadcasters. So in a way, I don't expect that our article is on a public broadcaster, but for example, it can be in 6 media outlets in Serbia. So yeah, be realistic and work towards the goal, and you will have success. If you are focusing just on having the biggest and the most difficult one, then the chance for success is lower. And at the end, it's also not really your fault. You've done everything you could, but yeah, you cannot force a public broadcaster to publish your news, while you can nurture a relationship with the media outlet that is interested in this.
Maria, thank you so much for these practical tips. And as I said, again, realistic tips. So I want to thank all of my panelists that are here with me, but also the ones that are online. Thank you so much for your time. I also want to thank DG NEAR and the European Commission for funding, but also ideating this session. We are very grateful for providing this opportunity for all of us. And most of all, I want to thank my colleague Betty, who is sitting in the background, that is taking notes from all this valuable input. So these notes will be shared with our colleagues for the next session, where we will do the wrap up. But needless to say, as per the usual procedure, all these notes will be concluded into a report. So everything what was said here, you will have it in writing, maybe also for sharing it with your organizations. And I also want to thank here my colleague, the technicians, that did that put together all these live streaming on Facebook and in all channels. So thank you so much. And I'll see you downstairs for the rest of the session. Thank you. Have a nice day.